Hey everyone, welcome to the show. Today we have Ian Westermann on from Essential Tennis. Ian, welcome.
Hey, thanks, Will. Appreciate it. Thanks for the invite.
So, for people who don't know you, you have one of the largest followings online as far as tennis goes. You've got 200 and I looked it up earlier, 269,000 YouTube subscribers, millions of views from your video lessons, a podcast, a blog, 20 different courses on technique, strategy, all sorts of stuff. But I want to hear from you. Like, if you're say like on a plane or at the grocery store and somebody says, what do you do? How do you answer that?
Well, yeah, when I say I'm a tennis coach, that's what I open with. When anybody asks, I just say I'm a tennis coach,
Right.
and more times than not, that there's not a lot more questions that come after that. People are just like, "Oh, okay, that's cool," and they just assume I'm at a club or whatever. If the
Right.
person happens to kind of be into tennis, then maybe they'll ask a few more questions, and then I'll have to kind of get into, well, it's kind of complicated. I'm actually like most of what I do is actually on the internet, and
Yeah.
people say, "Oh, that's weird on the how do you teach tennis on the internet?" And which is always kind of funny to me because in 2022, I mean, even 10 years ago, let's say 2012, when
Right.
anybody didn't know the answer to anything, they were already going to Google, they were already going to YouTube and typing in how
Yeah.
to change a flat tire or whatever. And
Right.
so, if you can learn how to change a flat tire on the internet, you definitely can learn how to hit a forehand or a serve. Obviously,
Yeah.
there's some technical nuance to it, and it doesn't replace in-person lessons. But even tennis players that I meet that don't know what I do, it's
Hmm.
still surprising to me how surprised they are that most of what I do is on the internet. It's kind of funny.
Right. That is good. So you're launching your new book called Essential Tennis, uh, coming up soon. When is the launch date for that?
May 31st.
May 31st. Okay, so that's really exciting. So tell us the story of well, just the story of Essential Tennis and then how the book kind of came to be.
Oh man, yeah, it's a long story, but I guess a short version is I was teaching full time. I graduated from college in 2004,
Hmm.
and my passion has always been tennis. If I could, I told myself if I could find any way to be on a tennis court and make a living, it was pretty clear to me relatively early, like I wasn't going to be playing. I was going to get
Hmm.
paid for doing that. But
Yeah.
the coach I had as a junior was such an inspiration to me and kind of a role model in terms of being an example of doing what you love every day. And so when I found out that I could potentially make a living being on a tennis court teaching and helping other players, that's
Hmm.
all I wanted to do. So I
Hmm.
started that full time in 2004 after graduating from Ferris State University. They had
Hmm.
a professional tennis management program.
Yeah.
And then got really frustrated really fast. It was surprising to
Hmm.
me that a big chunk of people who signed up for tennis lessons didn't really want to challenge themselves very much. Like you would
Hmm.
assume that they signed up and paid for my time, that they'd be willing to change their grip on their volley or
Right.
learn how to serve with spin instead of like pancaking it. And
Yeah.
there was so much like resistance from my students that it really, and not to mention like the straight up like babysitting, hours with kids and
Mm.
like there's just a lot of time a normal tennis coach spends that's not actually challenging their students and helping them develop and helping them get better and improve.
Hmm.
So that was what really motivated me to start publishing content. In 2008, I started the podcast because video is still pretty challenging back then. And
Hmm.
in 2009, I started the YouTube channel. And by 2011, I had quit my job to pursue it full time. And
Hmm.
so since 2011, I've published, I don't know, I need to figure out what the actual number is. It's definitely more than 6,000 videos,
Hmm.
probably 7 or 8,000 videos by this point. Um, Over 1,000 podcasts and thousands of emails and blog posts. And
Yeah.
so what the book really is it's the culmination of the last 20 years of the coaching that I've done and the lessons that I feel are the most fundamental, the most core principles of how tennis players get stuck and how they can break through those roadblocks and reach the goals that they have. And so it's like the distillation of everything that I've published over the last 13 years, all down into one piece of
Yeah,
content, if you will. 38 chapters, like basically 38 most important principles that I feel will make the biggest difference for tennis players.
perfect. So, so for people listening, we'll link to the book. They can pre-order it in the show notes. I spent the better part of the last hour going through that like Amazon preview thing where you can read the intro and stuff.
Nice.
And uh, you did a fantastic job with the intro, so I'm sure the rest of the book is really good as well. Um, and I mean, I probably only read maybe 8 or 10 pages, and I literally spent almost an hour just taking notes on like each paragraph and stuff because there's
Awesome.
so many quotes in there that are so good. So I want to start with the thing you kind of lead with is what's the number one thing that holds most tennis players back? So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, when you hear players complain about their biggest obstacles in a macro sense, like, big
Hmm.
picture, it's, my career, like I don't have enough time, I don't have enough
Hmm.
money, tennis lessons are expensive, especially if you go to somebody who's, really well known or like an academy or something like that. And
Hmm.
so, or maybe people will complain about how unathletic they are, how uncoordinated they are. And
Hmm.
so those are kind of addressed, right away in the introduction as the most common reasons why people it's their biggest excuses for not getting better, not breaking through to the level that they really want to play.
Right.
And so, yeah, the introduction in a nutshell introduces the idea that the ball is actually the biggest obstacle because every time the ball travels towards us, we have this deep desire to send it back as perfectly as possible, and
Hmm.
it's that desire to want to create the perfect outcome that keeps us stuck at the level we're at. Because as soon as we start to just respond intuitively, then we're going to grab onto whatever our current habits are because that's what we're most familiar with and comfortable with, and we feel confident that we can rely on what will happen if we use the standard forehand or the standard serve, the one that we've repeated thousands and thousands of times.
Right.
And so every time the ball travels towards us, it basically helps reinforce the habits we've always used. And so
Hmm.
there's this unfortunate like perpetuation that happens where the more matches somebody plays, even if they're focusing on getting better,
Hmm.
the more they'll always play that same level. And that's not, there's no like law or like rule to that, but it's generally very, very true. I've experienced it, myself a lot over the last couple years. And in my experience, that's the number one thing that holds players back.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And when I was reading through it, it really felt like I don't know. It felt kind of like a kind of a groundbreaking idea, honestly, like because um, one of the quotes you have in there is like it or not, your desire for a successful outcome will override your ability to move and swing correctly. So I
Yep.
talk a lot on this podcast about process versus outcome, and all the
Mhm.
best coaches in the world talk about that, right? And
Yep.
I feel like you can spend your whole life focused on this topic and still continue to learn more about like how humans um I guess interact with that idea of like process versus outcome, and this is definitely a new way that I haven't um thought about that concept. So um what's an example of someone who is having trouble with uh the process of improvement and the ball kind of holding them back? Let's take maybe a particular stroke or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's experienced this to a certain degree. It's just that not everybody might be aware of it.
Hmm.
I'm sure at some point you have experienced doing a couple shadow swings, and here's the thing: if you've never watched yourself play tennis, you've never watched yourself take a lesson, then what I'm about to describe, most of your listeners are going to be tempted to say, "Yeah, that sounds about right, but it probably doesn't happen to me."
Yeah.
But what I'm about to describe is 100% universal across all tennis players that have ever played the game of tennis, like forever and always. When I ask one of my students to show me a shadow swing of a forehand or a serve, and just, hey, just show me like what are you supposed to generally, do with your body and with the racket.
Hmm.
The shadow swing's always perfect, and it doesn't matter if it's a 5-0 player or a 3-0 player or
Hmm.
anything in between. Your current modern day passionate tennis player has consumed so much content. They've watched so many videos and listened to so many great, podcasts,
Hmm.
like yours will. They've got tons and tons of like knowledge and understanding about what they're supposed to do. And they even can make their way to their body and their racket, and
Hmm.
without the outside pressure and responsibility of needing to get the ball back in the court, they can demonstrate a perfectly coordinated tennis move of some kind. And
Right.
then the very next second, if I feed them a ball or click start on the ball machine and the ball comes towards
Yeah.
them and then they swing, they become a completely different human being, a completely different athlete. And if it
Yeah.
wasn't for the video that I use as a standard in my coaching, tennis players would never ever believe it.
Yeah.
They would just assume, and they do assume, and this is why it's so dangerous. This is why players get so stuck, that whatever they understand and know cognitively, like in their head, whatever
Hmm.
knowledge they have about tennis, they just assume kind of percolates and makes its way through into the rest of
Right.
their body. And they completely discount the role of habit, like the way that we've always hit a forehand, the way we've
Yeah.
always hit a serve. And so there's this the book talks about the difference between feel and real. Like there's the kinesthetic experience that we have on the courts, and that's like Dr. Jekyll. And then
Hmm.
there's the reality of like what we know we should be doing, but there's a huge gap in between the two. And in a nutshell, I view that as like that's my role as a coach. That's my responsibility as a coach, is to bring together and unify the what it feels like and what's actually happening into one plane of understanding. But most tennis players don't even know there is a gap there. And
Right.
that, in a nutshell, is the opportunity for them to make very rapid improvement, is having that gap illuminated and then being like, holy crap, like I thought I was doing all these things like correctly and I'm actually not. Those are the things that'll lead to the biggest improvements. And in a nutshell, that's what I'm most passionate about as a coach.
Yeah. Yeah. It's mind blowing what the video can do. I I work with Warren Pretorius over at Tennis Analytics, and
Oh yeah, yeah. Tell Warren I say hi.
I will. So we put together a course a couple years ago for coaches, like a certification course, for coaches to learn how to use video and implement it in their coaching, for technique. And one of the things that he mentions in the course is how tennis is like a motor learning skill, right? And people, he cites some studies. I don't remember where they're from because we created it a while ago, but he cites some studies, and essentially the conclusion of it is like when we are taught a motor learning skill audibly, we learn it like far less effectively than when
Hmm.
we see it visually. So that's, I think, part of why this video is so powerful. And like you said, a lot of people are going to be like, no, no, that's not me. Like, I know how to hit the forehand. And then when they see it, and I've done this myself, I think I'm doing one thing on my serve and I'm like, my foot's doing that. When I see it
Yeah,
on video, I'm
exactly.
like, what? So I highly encourage people to, yeah, definitely take video of themselves, and maybe we can do a part two with more on like how to set that up. But that's
Sure.
super, super powerful. Um, so another thing on the process of improvement, and then we'll dive into some double stuff. One quote I saw in here was in this intro: "What would it take to beat the player you are now in 3 months, 6060?" And I think that's like, I love questions, and I think people learn best when you ask them the right questions, right? And I think this is a great, great question. So talk a little bit about like how that came up and what you mean by that.
Yeah, I think yeah, I totally agree about the power of questions. I think it forces when somebody is hit with that problem to try to overcome. How do I beat that player, which is which is yourself? I think it automatically puts a player into a mindset of strengths and weaknesses. Like
Hmm.
what are the assets and liabilities here? Um, if you're forced to have to take full inventory of yourself as an
Yeah.
athlete, and in one column put like, okay, what am I really good at that I could potentially double down on and really make a huge weapon, like a huge asset on the court. And in the other
Hmm.
column, like, what is my absolute biggest liability? Like the thing that if I were going to play myself, man, if I just hit the ball here or use this pattern again and again and again and again, I could easily, bagel myself if I had the ability to do that. And
Right.
so I think it automatically, to a certain degree, forces a player to self-analyze a little bit deeper than they normally have. I mean, we all beneath the surface, I think, have some kind of intuition about what we're good and bad at, and but thinking about it in terms of if I was my own opponent,
Hmm.
anybody who's played tennis for a significant length of time, I think, is used to stepping on a court, going through a warm up, and another chapter in the book is warming up like Sherlock Holmes, and as quickly as possible, like breaking down and deconstructing, somebody else on the other side of the court. But we rarely, I think, do that truly, like, about ourselves. And it's
Right.
easy to go out there day after day, practice session, private lesson, match play, and kind of just focus on like what feels good in the moment, and kind of
Hmm.
just hit the shots that are satisfying and that allow us to leave the court feeling like we were really successful that day.
Right.
And if you do that like year after year after year, I think it can lead to a lot of tunnel vision. And so pondering on that question, how would I beat myself 0-0, and putting the time frame on it, like, really, I think, even pours gas on the fire, and it's like, oh crap, like, if I had to
Yeah.
figure that out, like, what would it take? Like, how frequently would I have to train? What are the things that I would prioritize in that training? What are the
Hmm.
things that I would not prioritize? Because with that 3 month restriction, like, I'm obviously not going to complete. I'm not going to have like John Isner's serve in 3 months. So
Yeah.
what do I focus on that is going to be meaningful, that I
Hmm.
actually could knock out in a 3 month period? So yeah, I think it forces a process of deconstruction and prioritization, and then also forces the time frame forces more specific planning in terms of like what to do and how frequently on the court.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a ton of sense. The One of the things that came up for me when you were talking about that was how people like go out there and it may be like a practice session or a drill or something, and they'll just kind of go through the motions and not really focus on a specific thing. And one of the questions like I ask myself, and I was just in a drill. I do a Tuesday drill with a bunch of guys, and I ask myself all the time, like in the middle of a point or after a point, even if I won the point, I say like, okay, would that have worked against like a 5-5 player or a
Yeah.
6-0 player? And it's like maybe I won that point, but like I wouldn't get away with that against a better player. So like, how can I do even better next time? And if you can constantly kind of keep asking yourself that, ask yourself this 3 month 6060 question on a kind of ongoing basis. And then another thing you touch on, which we won't get into, is having an actual tennis journal, which I think is a really powerful idea, so that you can kind of track your progress over time.
For sure.
So let's dive into, looks like we got 25 minutes or so. Let's go through a couple chapters that I haven't read them, obviously, but I saw the titles. So I want to lead with Doubles Therapy 1, Come Together. Give us a little preview of the Doubles Therapy 1.
Yeah, sure. So a huge part, like a big thesis in the book related to doubles, is just the idea that being a good doubles partner is a lot like any other relationship in life. Um, there's a lot of it depends on how open and vulnerable you are. A lot of it depends on how unconditionally you can be supportive, and how empathetic you can be towards the other person.
Hmm.
A lot of it just basically comes down to psychology.
Hmm.
And if any of those things are going to happen, then you have to be in some kind of routine of connection with your partner. And again, like we could, just easily be talking about any other relationship in
Yeah.
human existence. The frequency of which you actually physically come together and connect has a huge, huge bearing in terms of how effective you're going to be as a team.
Hmm.
And yet, when you watch, I don't know, probably a solid 75% of
Yeah.
competitive adult, like club level, amateur, whatever you want to call
Hmm.
it, your normal everyday tennis, which I group myself, in that, by the way. Most people are really playing a solo sport, but under the same umbrella of like a team. But they're
Hmm.
really just kind of managing themselves, their own half of the courts, their own emotions, their own tactics and strategy, and maybe occasionally they'll kind of lob like some encouragement like across the center of the court, over to the other person. But there isn't any kind of like routine connection
Hmm.
that's really actually like meaningful and beneath like just the very, very surface, like, oh, good try, or uh, good idea, or like something like that.
Yeah.
And then when you contrast that, it's a shame that doubles doesn't get. I saw you've had whole episodes on this.
Yeah.
Doubles obviously doesn't get the exposure, the TV time it deserves. But when you watch any from college level doubles on up through professional,
Hmm.
every single point, virtually, like there's some kind of like connection. Like the players are coming together to physically encourage each other, not just audibly or verbally.
Hmm.
And they're swapping like notes and observations and tactics between every single point. And it might not be that deep. Like if a team is rolling and they have the momentum,
Yeah.
they might skip the tactics, talk, and it's obvious to both players, like, okay, just rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat.
Hmm.
But at the very least, they're coming together physically to encourage each other. And just in case one or the other has noticed something in the last 30 seconds that's important, if you don't have that built-in habit of coming together physically between each point, then you miss the opportunity to be able to easily do that. And most players just don't even do that basic level of connection and communication. And so it leaves tons and tons of uh, optionality, be able to do other tactical things on the table because they just don't even have that routine.
Right. Yeah. It's such an like easy lever to pull
Yeah, totally.
on the doubles court. Like it's, if you're not doing this and you start doing this, you're automatically going to become a better doubles team. And it reminds me of I had Jorge Capistani on
Yeah, I
last
saw
year,
that.
and he
Long
has,
interview, right? It was like an hour, 45-minute
dude,
show. Jorge's the man.
it was, the content was so good. We just got on a roll and kept going. But yeah, he has that good partner mojo video, which I'll link to in
Hmm.
the show notes. And it's about like the between points routine and stuff like that. And then it also reminds me, I'll see if I can find this, but I think there was like a study on the Phoenix Suns or something in 2008 around the Steve Nash years, and they looked at the number of like high fives they gave each other
Nice.
between plays, and it was like significantly more than its second most in the league.
Huh.
And they somehow like correlated that with the wins or something, or free throw percentage. Maybe it was between free throws. I don't remember. I'll see if I can find that. But the conclusion was like physical touch actually helps the Phoenix Suns be a better team.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, there's a reason the pro players do it, like you said, um, for sure. So super important there. Um, and then you have another doubles chapter called Doubles Therapy 2, Meet My Lesser Half. Did you already touch on some of that, or do you want to talk about that a little bit?
No, that was a totally different one. That
Okay.
basically revolved around the as a as a tennis coach and as a digital marketer. Um, you can only be good at creating programs and selling them if you're very attuned to what people's problems or frustrations are, right? Just on
Hmm.
a very basic like level. If you want to be a good marketer, a good salesperson, and you want to create helpful, resources, you have to know what people think is their biggest problem.
Hmm.
And after years and years and years of doing surveys and asking people, doubles players specifically, because I love doubles and I've created a bunch of programs just for doubles players. I'm
Hmm.
I'm better at doubles than I am in singles. Like it's where I've had the most success personally, and
Hmm.
I love the tactics of it. So over the years, as I've surveyed tennis players, just normal everyday tennis players, and asked them what their biggest frustration is, the same thing like comes to the top over and over and over again. It's kind of, and you can kind of translate it a couple different ways, but it basically boils down to I would be great if my partner just knew what the hell they were doing. like and other like
Wow.
basically uh uh I know exactly what to do, but I always get paired with people that aren't any good at doubles. And so how do I win when my partner is bad? Is like the theme that boils to the top over and over
Huh.
and over again, which is kind of fascinating. I mean,
It
it kind of
is.
makes sense, like from a psychology perspective, that um, well, there's two people on the team, and if people are kind of looking for an easy out, like, well, it's going to be the other guy or the other girl. If you're a little
Yeah.
cynical, maybe you decode it that way. But in reality, when we actually do play with somebody significantly weaker than us, like what are the tactical things that we can deploy in order to be as successful as possible? Because it's
Hmm.
kind of joking and like ribbing people a little bit about making that an excuse, but obviously it really does happen in real life that we play with somebody
Sure.
that just doesn't know where to stand, doesn't know where to aim. You can go down the entire list, like doesn't run for lobs, like whatever you want to complain about. Like it is a reality sometimes.
Hmm.
So in a nutshell, that chapter kind of sets up a hierarchy of, okay, are you and your partner more or less in the ballpark related relative to your opponents? In which case, just kind of stay the course, kind of more or less play your standard, plan A, and
Hmm.
no need to like rock the boat or do anything super crazy or super aggressive.
Right.
On the other hand, if you're playing a team that's super savvy, like they are unified as a team, they're being really aggressive and proactive and like taking the action to us. And as a
Hmm.
result, they're picking on that. Like they've clearly identified the partner's weaker. And so we've all been in this situation, right? Where it doesn't feel like we're even like involved in the match because every
Right.
ball is going over to our partner.
Hmm.
That chapter of the book outlines in a lot of detail. Okay, so here's how, like, you basically have two options. You go totally off the gas pedal and okay, like we're just gonna play straight up defense, disengage. We're going back to the baseline. We're gonna lob everything and hope that they just mess up.
Hmm.
And it might work. But as a coach, I'm always trying to kind of challenge my students and push them out of their comfort zone. And so I'm much more an advocate of let's put our foot fully on the gas pedal. Like if you do anything in between and you're just kind of wishy-washy in
Yeah.
that situation, like it's
You're
you
gonna
might as well.
lose.
You're right. You
Yeah.
might as well just go to the parking lot and grab a beer,
Yeah. Yeah.
because like it's they're gonna just smother you and take over. So you either like totally play defense or go to the full other end of the spectrum and be as active, proactive, as aggressive with your footwork and your positioning as possible. Poach as often as you can. And these are the things that make, in my experience, doubles players the most uncomfortable and the most
Yeah.
squeamish is the idea of like, God forbid you go across the center line, go to the other side of the court. Like that's like
Yeah.
it's like having to go to Mordor or something in Lord of the Rings. And so a huge part of my coaching career with doubles players has revolved around that idea. So anyway, the chapter just more or less lays out like here's how to think about whether to go defense or go offense, but you've got to go hard in one direction or the other if you're going to have a chance in that scenario.
Right. Yeah. I've got a video. I need to look at it. It's probably one of my most popular videos now that you mentioned that that's such an issue for people. But
What if your
It's
partner's
called
bad?
it's like how to win with a weak partner. And yeah,
Totally. Yeah,
I
that's it,
look
man.
at it as like kind of a risk profile, and it's like if my partner's much weaker than me and the other team recognizes it, then I've just got to take a lot more risk on for
Exactly.
myself, right? And like, um, if that might mean getting to the net and just poaching a lot and getting beat down the line some,
Yep.
but you're forcing a lot more errors, you're getting yourself involved, you're trying to get into their head. Or like you said, if you play that middle ground and just try to play straight up, like maybe you're taking less risk and maybe you win a few extra games, but you're less likely to win the overall match. So it
Yep.
makes a lot of sense that that you would have to do that. But yeah, I'm sure you dive a lot deeper into it, and yeah, the frameworks are really good to learn about that. So let's go through. It looks like Zoom has changed here, unfortunately. Uh, I used
What's
to be
that?
able to I used to be able to record for like as long as I wanted one on one, but now it says
Oh
we only
yeah.
have 7.5 minutes left. But anyways, let's go through the mental game. I know you have a whole kind of section on that with multiple chapters. Talk a little bit about the mental game as far as what are some of the most common issues people run into at 3540, and how do people deal with that?
Yeah, it's a huge topic. I'm just as passionate about that as I am about doubles. I think the mental game is really misunderstood by a lot of players,
Hmm.
and I guess in a nutshell, like first of all, like let's talk about the players that we're trying to help and we're trying to reach. Very frequently, these are I think the two most common profiles that come across my channel are either players who played a little bit as a kid, maybe like high school, and then they went to college, they started their career, they started a family, and now the kids are a little bit older, they have a little bit of free time again, maybe a little bit of disposable income, and so now they're like, oh yeah, I should go back and pick up tennis again. Like that's
Hmm.
super common in terms of my followers. And then the second type that's really common is a 30 something, 40 something, 50 something that's picking it up for the first time. It's not that they are refanning the flames from when they were a kid, but they have the disposable time and income, and now they're picking up us, like they're looking for some new way to challenge themselves mentally, physically,
Hmm.
athletically, and so they're trying tennis. So when you think about those two types of people, broadly speaking, and in terms of like generalities, um, your average person is more or less avoided putting themselves in a high profile, high pressure situation where all eyes are on them and they're personally responsible for the outcome of like what happens over the next hour to hour and a half. Not everybody, like some people obviously, enjoy the challenge and, personal exposing themselves and stuff like that, a growth mindset, you could call it.
Yeah.
But your average person, I think, that scares. I mean, you've probably heard that people's biggest fear in life is public speaking. It's not even
Hmm.
death. I think death is number two, and then public speaking, if I remember correctly, public speaking is number one. And
Hmm.
so playing tennis is kind of like athletic public speaking. It's like you're all alone out there, like literally kind of on a stage. Like you're on this like flat space. A lot of times that's like sunken, and like people are like watching you like all around, and it's a terrifying thing for a lot of people. And so when you don't have a personality that kind of intuitively relishes that scenario and environment, a couple of things happen. Anxiety obviously kicks in. There's self doubt comes after the anxiety, and then
Hmm.
there's a lot of focusing on on the past and on the future. Like, oh man, last time I felt like this, I totally choked, and or last time the score was like this, I totally blew it. Or they're projecting into the future. Man, what if I lose to Sally? Like I'm gonna lose my spot, in the lineup, or what's everybody gonna think or say, like in the clubhouse, or
Yeah.
whatever. And so anything but focusing on the present and problem solving, like what can I do in the next point or the next shot to set myself up for success. And
Hmm.
so then it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. and the player gets super tight, blows the match, and then there's this like negative association and like psychological downward spiral that happens where the more they think about it and the more they are exposed to that feeling, the more negative connotation gets associated with it in their own head. And now there's what, in my opinion, the standard like approach has been is like, okay, so let's figure out how can we pretend this isn't there? Like, okay, if the bad feelings make me play bad, then I need to like pretend that I'm happy. I need to think about like puppies or freaking rainbows or something. Or I need to trick myself into thinking like the score is different. Like, no, it's not close to the end of the match. It's really the beginning of the match. I always play good in the beginning of the match. So the score is not 5-2. It's actually like 1-1. And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I need to look at my strings, and if I just like straighten my strings enough, then I won't think about how crappy I feel inside, and so I won't blow it. And so there's all these like elaborate strategies to try to distract the
Yeah.
average tennis player. When for me, in reality, if you study the mindsets and you study the mental states and approaches of the
Hmm.
greatest like performers, not just in tennis but across like any discipline you want to look at, it's a completely different relationship to that what triggered that whole domino stack falling was that
Yeah.
initial feeling of anxiety. And
Hmm.
high performers have a complete 180 different relationship to that initial feeling of like tension. Elite performers feel it and they're excited about it. They're like aroused by it, like athletically. And it's like, this is incredible. Like, this is why I came out today to test myself. I know it's important to me because I feel this. And so they actually relish the opportunity to test themselves in that environment. And so rather than try to like push it away and rather than view it as like a symptom of some like big problem, they actually view it as a huge plus, like a huge opportunity. And so
Yeah.
there's a upward spiral, like there's a constructive
Hmm.
relationship that gets built, like, and that way, like if you lose, well, at least you have the satisfaction of knowing that you did your best in the face of that adversity, and you relish the opportunity and you gave everything you had, and so you can, there's something that you can actually be satisfied with there. But as long as players and sorry, this has gone on a little while, but
You're good.
as long as players have a oh no relationship
Hmm.
to that tension, they're always going to struggle. The
Yeah.
best players in the world have the exact same feelings, and instead of saying oh no, they're saying oh yeah, like this is exactly what it's
Yeah.
all about.
It goes the opposite direction. Okay, so we were talking about the mental game. And yeah, so when you're talking about that, that reminds me kind of Nadal's quote after the Australian Open this year. I think he said something like when he was down 2-0, and I think he may have been down a break in the third to Medvedev. Uh, and he said like, I might lose, I might win, but I can't not try, and
Nice.
he starts to like feel that pressure, and his effort is just like such a different level. And I think it's a good like perspective on it. It's like, what are you going to regret most, winning, losing, or not trying? And if you can convince yourself to like regret not trying the most, then all you have to do is just keep putting in the effort, and eventually you get there. But yeah, the psychology, I mean, we can do a whole episode on that.
For
That's
sure.
super fascinating stuff to me.
Yeah, I think it's worth pointing out in that quote the truth that Nadal was fully open to the possibility that losing is a possibility.
Yeah.
Going back to like the putting a band-aid on it or trying to like trick ourselves, like how many times have you heard people say something along the lines of like, oh, you gotta be confident, like you gotta
Yeah.
exude like losing's not even like
Yeah.
you have to like manifest like success, you gotta visualize it, like winning's the only
Right.
possibility. That's bullcrap, man. Like
Yeah.
if you're not
I agree.
okay with losing, tennis is not the sport for you. Like
Yeah.
you, because you're gonna lose a freaking lot, no
Yeah.
matter what level you are, how good you are, you're gonna lose a lot. And so if
Hmm.
Nadal in his own head sees losing as a possibility, I think, I mean, that should be kind of a big takeaway
Yeah.
for people. You have to embrace that possibility in order to be okay with going out and giving your best. Because if losing's not even a possibility in your own head and you're down 2 sets in a break, well, that's peak freakout like mode, like in your
Right.
head. If you're trying to push that possibility away and try to avoid the idea that it's even within the
Yeah.
realm of possibility, that's when you're going to lose it, like mentally.
Yeah.
You have to be balanced and you have to be realistic, or else mental toughness is impossible.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that's helped me in the past is to look at some of my, like, I guess most significant losses over the last 5 years or so, and like the idea that they're even significant is kind of comical because these are like USTA 4-5 or open tournaments or whatever, and it's like none of it matters. I'm not getting paid for any of it. But yeah, and then like you think about it, and like there was a 9-0 mixed match where we were in the finals and we have a chance to go to nationals, and it was 7-8 and I double faulted, and it was like it was
That
pretty much
sucks.
like, yeah, I mean, it was pretty much like the worst as far as league tennis goes. Like it was the worst thing that could possibly happen, probably. And like a month later, like nobody talked about it, nobody cared. Like even a week later, like,
Yeah.
so I don't know. It helps to think about that and get perspective. And the next time I'm nervous, I'm like, you know, if I lose in a week, like nobody's gonna remember this. So let's just play our best and do the best we can. Um, so I know you got to run here in a few minutes. Let's end with a few rapid fire questions, and
Sure.
maybe we do a round two
Yeah.
at some point because we have a lot. There's so much content that I wasn't even able to get to. So, what is your favorite tennis book other than yours?
Um, I'm not a big reader. Okay, so my favorite book that's not a tennis book, but there are actual tennis examples in it,
Hmm.
it's called Mastery by George Leonard. I'm pretty sure. Let me double check that really quick. It's about the learning process. George Leonard.
Okay.
It's just called Mastery, and he uses several tennis specific examples in like the first couple of chapters. It's a short book, and it's all about, in a nutshell, like the relationship between um, expectations and the process of improvement.
Hmm.
Really early in our conversation, Will, you talked about the process versus the outcome. And so that's a core, like, central theme to that book. And anybody who's interested in being satisfied and happy in their tennis and fulfilled, like regardless of the outcome,
Hmm.
um, to some people, maybe that even sounds like bad. Like, no, like I want to be like hardcore and like win all my matches. But like I said before, like tennis will really beat you up. Like
Hmm.
if you don't have a clear, healthy perspective on your place in the game and expectations and how improvement really works and like how you should really view the improvement process, like you're, especially if you're kind of a type A, like perfectionistic kind of personality. I've seen so many players just get burned out because it's too emotionally like draining for them. So, yeah,
Yeah.
Mastery by George Leonard it was really impactful on me.
Cool. We'll link to that in the show notes.
Yeah,
What is your favorite tournament,
to
like pro
watch.
tournament, to watch or attend?
I gotta go
Go
Indian
to
Wells.
Indian
I've been
Wells.
to it a lot, and the whole thing. Now I've
Yeah.
been to the U.S. Open. I haven't been to the Australian or the French. I've been to the Wimbledon site, but not during the tournament. So just to
Okay.
to put my answer in perspective.
Yeah.
So there's a lot I haven't experienced in person yet, but a
Indian Wells. Yeah.
tennis is by far best enjoyed in person.
Hmm.
Professional tennis, like it's just a completely different experience. So I'm going based on my in-person experiences, and I'd go Indian Wells. It's got the same like quality field as the U.S. Open or any other slam. Like every good player in the world is there, but the weather's freaking perfect every
Yeah.
day. Like it's beautiful, beautiful like scenery.
Yeah.
And it's like spread out and it's clean,
Yeah.
unlike
New
like
York.
the U.S. Open experience, which I love. Like I love that experience too.
Yeah.
If I had to pick one experience I've had so far, it would definitely be Indian Wells.
Yeah. Definitely one of my favorites too. Um, so last question, how can we make pro doubles more popular?
I don't know, man. That's a hard
It's
question.
it is.
It's weird, and I saw it scrolling through your episodes. Like it is funny that your average tennis player plays more doubles than singles,
Hmm.
but we put so high on a pedestal like the even in a team sport like football or basketball or baseball or hockey, like whatever, soccer, like we put like the individual on so high on a pedestal even in team sports
Yeah.
that I think that's kind of the problem.
Mm.
This is the first time really like thinking about it this way. But like you think about soccer and like okay, I don't watch soccer. I'm not a fan of soccer, but I know who Messi is,
Yeah.
and because he's like a god in soccer. Um, I couldn't name one other teammate. Like I don't know like who else is on his team, but I've heard of him, like Cristiano Ronaldo. Like I don't watch soccer, but I'm aware of who he is.
Yeah.
Um, and if it was really about the team, which if you're from the country of those teams, like obviously it's about the team. But if
Yeah.
you're a fan of the sport, like it's the individuals, it's like curious,
Mm.
especially like the polarizing, figures.
Yeah.
You like love them or hate them, kind of like that's what draws eyeballs and attention. Like
Interesting. Yeah.
who's the bad boy, player of doubles? I
Yeah.
don't know. Can you name anybody? Curious plays.
Probably curious.
Yeah, right. He plays doubles sometimes, but he's not a doubles player, right?
Yeah.
So, um, I think that's a
Interesting.
lot of it. Like, there's the Bryan
Yeah.
brothers, and they're cool because they're like they got the twins thing going, and they got the chest pump, and it's like okay, cool. Like we got some
Yeah.
fan like energy and engagement, kind of stuff
Hmm.
going on. I can't even name another, doubles team that's known for being like dynamic and like connected like they are. And
Yeah.
so, yeah,
They
I think
switch
it's
partners a lot. Yeah.
yeah, right. Yeah. So yeah, it's hard to get behind as a fan, I think, when we worship the individual players so much, number one. And then
Hmm.
number two, who are the polarizing, like maybe they're out there and I just don't know because they just don't get airtime. Like
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but there's some thoughts. So I don't know. I don't know how you fix that. Like, I
Yeah.
like what Larry Ellison at the BMP does. Like he gives $1 million, last I heard, $1 million bonus if you win both the singles and the doubles, and so it
Oh,
more or less forces the top players to like, oh well, I'll just enter the double. Like who knows? Maybe
try
we'll get
it.
on
Yeah.
a hot streak and like win doubles. Like even if it's a fluke, like extra $1 million. And so that's where you'll see like Nadal play with Lopez or
Hmm.
Kyrgios play with, who I don't even know who Kyrgios plays with.
Yeah.
Um, so anyway, I like that approach by Larry Ellison. I don't know that any other tournament does that, but let's get the big like top of the pedestal personalities of the game. Like if they're not
Hmm.
involved in a doubles, then I don't see how it can possibly equal singles.
Yeah. It's definitely helped that Kyrgios has played some this year.
Yeah.
And then
Who does
even
he who does he
Isner's
play
been
with
good.
normally?
Well, he won the Australian Open with another
Oh
Aussie
yeah, with
guy,
Kakanakis. Yeah.
Kokonakis. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
so
like that's fantastic. Yeah, I saw
yeah,
so many clips of that going around because they're both
yeah,
screwing around and just doing
right,
Australian, stuff,
yeah,
messing with the crowd and like doing trick shots and like yeah, that's doubles needs that for sure.
right. And Isner and Schwartzman are in the semifinals in Rome now, and they're
Nice.
they're hilarious because their height difference is 15 inches. So it's like it's funny to watch them too. Cool, man. Well, this was fun. We're gonna for everybody listening, we're gonna link to the book in the show notes. People can pre-order it. It goes or launches May 31st. Any final requests before we let you go?
Just keep doing the show, Will. That's it. Like I know it can be a drag sometimes, and but I really believe strongly in digital content and media. I feel like tennis is slow. to embrace new stuff in general.
It's getting
But
better though.
yeah, it's slow though, man. I've been doing this for
Yeah.
13 years. So I'm a little bit old and like jaded in terms of being a content creator. So
Yeah.
when I see new people jumping in and committing to it, like seeing like the people you've had on your show and like the number of episodes you've already done, like that makes me really optimistic about the future of the game, and the future of tennis content, on the internet. So that's my only request. Just keep uploading episodes. That's it.
I will. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. It means a lot. Awesome. Well, yeah, for everyone listening, thank you. And like I said, we'll link to everything in the show notes and talk to you in the next episode. If you want to become a smarter doubles player and start winning more matches, then join the Tennis Tribe Doubles Strategy newsletter. Every single Thursday, I'll send you a new doubles tip or tactic that you can use in your very next match. And when you join, you're going to get a free guide on how to play with more confidence and start dominating at the net in doubles. My name's Will. I'm the founder of the Tennis Tribe, and over the last 5 years, I've worked with players at every level of the game, from USTA 3.0 players all the way to Division I college programs, as well as some of the top 10 doubles players in the world. And on Thursdays, with this strategy newsletter, I share that knowledge and advice that I've gained over the years with you. So to sign up, you can go to thetennistribe.com. And again, you'll get that free net play guide when you join.